The second song is the interactive song.
So I hope your voices are all ready. And this particular song is called Walba Wanganye, and Walba means wind. Can you say Walba? Walba. And Wanganye. Wanganye. And that means speaking or talking, and that's in Yangunjara language. So Walba, Wanganye. And then the next word I'd like you to learn is Gulila. And that means listen. And that's part of our thinking today, is that we really need to listen deeply. Waba wangani, waba wangani, waba wangani, waba wangani. Gulila, listen. Gulila, listen to the wind. Gulila, listen. Gulila, listen to the wind. Listen to the wind, it's telling us we're connected. Listen to the wind, it's telling us we're connected. Waba wangani, waba wangani. Gulila, listen. Gulila, listen to the wind. Gulila, listen. Gulila, listen to the wind. Thank you.
I've got to make a bit of noise and ask those spirits to come and join me. So the way I do that is with my old sticks. It's going pretty good today, there's no wind. I can feel the spirits are with us.
This is our call to recognise signs that continue to mark and haunt contemporary Indigenous life. Our call to continue imagining the unimaginable and theorising from the position of the unthought. A kind of rememory where, despite being historically controlled and archived by the state to the point of erasure, our memories still exist out there in the world. Our memories are here, on this cultural precinct site, deeply social, collective, and waiting for us to bump into, so we might read the signs and create at that point of struggle between remembering and forgetting. It can sometimes feel impossible to navigate.
We can regale you with the litany of horrendousness at any of our institutions, but it's like we all think that they're special. I think there's a way that our institutions kind of draw us into this very dysfunctional, this sense of urgency and the sense of I must respond to this massive, it's not just like a little fire, but this bonfire, I must respond right now. And so everything ends up being in this kind of crisis mode.
It's about distribution of labour, yeah, and not having to do the work all the time. If you're like any person of colour, you're expected to answer questions that the institution has, even though you might not be from that region. Like, it's exhausting. There are days where I've actually had to spend half an hour on an email just trying to find the right words to actually, in a very diplomatic way, to actually explain what it is that the museum's doing is really problematic. But then it's like, well, that's me doing the labour, and I shouldn't have to do that. Like, that's actually counterproductive. So it's like, are you paying me to do my actual job, or are you paying me to do cultural consultation? Because they're two very different things.
There's so many incredibly violent but also loving, beautiful reminders of our ancestors throughout these colonised cities. And often those local histories are erased. It's not just an academic writing about feeling something. It's actually like that embodied, lived experience that a lot of our community have this feeling of just the actual weight of where we are located and the weight of the knowledge of the histories that everyone else seems to be unable to understand or even remember.
It's just the nature of being Indigenous in a world that continues to make less space for Indigenous people. You choose to ignore it, then you choose to ignore it, but gosh, what's that going to do to your soul, you know? So I choose to act upon it every day because I'd rather do that than ignore these ancestors in me.
One of my struggles is getting non-Indigenous academics and researchers to engage with Indigenous research methods, because their want seems to be to make us brown versions of themselves, and do the kinds of research that they think is, or approach research in a way that they think would answer the questions that I have. But my questions come from such a different place.
So much of the work within Indigenous studies is funded directly by government, so I do feel a need to, on the one hand, protect it, but on the other hand, how much does that weakness its ability to change, to create change? So that's definitely something I'm juggling.
We can read the space, we can read the body, we can read how people are moving, we understand that quite clearly. And so when we go into a teaching space, what we find is we need to also make that space black space. And it's when we teach students about the trauma and the experience, it's not like we're not experiencing it over and over and over again. Because the kind of narratives or the kind of history, if you will, that we're telling is our history, it's about us.
Ultimately, what moves you and what moves students is the vulnerability of our relationships to the knowledge. So when we come together and have an intimate, inward-facing conversation with each other, what we are also doing is allowing people to see that we are vulnerable in the face of enormous, movements of power across countries, and that is unfinished business, that we are still collectively bearing that burden, and that we continue to do that. We hold space in spaces that are almost unbearable to hold space in, and it's only through each other and looking into each other's eyes that we can actually, that I have the strength to be able to do it.
I tell my students on the first day in Pussy 101, and I think some of them think I'm crazy, but I'm like, I'm not here to just speak to your mind, and if I only speak to your mind this trimester, that I've failed. I want to tug at your guts, I want to pull at your heart, I want you to feel the Pacific with me. And if you don't feel it at the end of this, then I haven't done my job.
In my village, we have that kind of sayings. As a young man or young generation, you should let your body go ahead. Let your mouth go behind. In my daily life, I do many works. I do cultivating, I do spearfishing, I do hunting, I cook, and I dance with my friends in the village, my people, my family. So all those kind of bodily practice produce that kind of affection habitus. So it cannot separate from myself, not only my body, my motion, my spirit.
A lot of us have a creative practice that exists alongside our proper research or our traditional outputs, and it is actually our creative practice that saves us within the academy, that keeps us there.
May I grow old enough to be forgotten. May my questions become passé. May my bibliographies become outdated. May my theories be superseded. May I be obsolete. May I teach students who teach students who teach students. May I meet these younger thinkers at conferences. May I read and cite their work. May I watch them stand more stably than I could ever have dreamed. May I sit in committee meetings where young colleagues raise new challenges because the old ones have finally been put to rest. May I watch the old guard quietly move on. But more than this, may I live long enough to be part of an old guard who younger scholars wish would retire. May I get to retire. May I see scores of Indigenous scholars write hundreds of Indigenous books that ask thousands of Indigenous questions. May I meet Indigenous vice-chancellors, presidents, professors and deans. May they not all be men. May I lie on a future deathbed and look back with regrets related to work rather than regrets related to family. May my passing be unshocking, not early, not unexpected. May I run out of ideas before I run out of time.
I've always known ANU as to be this kind of constructed space or constructed institution, which I kind of was like, what is it? And we were having these questions of like, what is the ANU? Is it the people? Is it the students? Or is it the is it the chancellors? Like, nobody could actually say what is the university. And we want to make sure communities always come back to the museum. Do you want to ensure that as ANU as a collective body, an institution, do you want to ensure that Indigenous people feel safe here? Do you want to ensure that they can always want to come back and feel like they belong here? And it led me to think about this question, which is, do you want to see Indigenous people thrive?
It's challenging, again, to kind of get back to your question, to work in an institution where you want to liberate your students, but you're working in an institution that continually reinforces settler colonial power. So how do you kind of subvert that power? How do you challenge it? For me, it's in the classroom.
A solidarity that I really love is working with students. I mean, I get so much. I've taught students for 21 years, and our students don't enter the room as empty vessels. They come in with a world of knowledge. And when an educator can see that their knowledge is, we're an expert in a particular field, if that's what you want to call it, but we also have many bodies in the room who embody their own knowledges. And when we can actually shift that thinking and not just see ourselves only as always the expert, then that's where I think really strong learning can occur.
Our community is our student body.
Yeah,
we need to nurture and grow and protect and keep them strong, because they are in disciplines and they choose to go in disciplines that we are actively critiquing and dismantling in our work as Indigenous scholars. So it's about how to give them the tools, and this is where the creative arts, I think, is so powerful, to be able to educate and support them in those disciplines through through these really beautiful ways. So you get into the guts and the heart of trauma and those really, some of those really violent histories of oppression and these ongoing struggles.
Most of the academic expect the scholars always talk by writing. Yeah, but as a scholars living in the indigenous community, as a member of the indigenous community, I'm required by the others. I have to do first.
I think the first things that university needs to do is acknowledge and understand that when Indigenous peoples welcome you to country, they are actually enacting their sovereignty, and that can never be taken, no matter how anyone looks at that or critiques that. And so in that process, it means that university has to reflect on its role of colonialism. And in doing that, in that process of truth-telling, that is the beginning to build reciprocal relationships, to form solidarity within the academy, between scholars, with students, and to form those communities within an institution. And I think something that we've done in these last few days is actually talk about the importance of connecting with Indigenous scholars locally, nationally, but within the Pacific and internationally as well. So in that sense, that solidarity means that you can sit in front of people and talk strong and talk about uncomfortable things. And as Donna Horaway would say, staying with the trouble and having those hard conversations, but working towards something that is a future far bigger than any one of us.